Chronicle 1, The Great Awakening. Chapter 1, White Noise. It's 5:30 a.m. David knows this because even without looking at the alarm plus clock, brought to him by Arrowgate Solutions, he knows this because he always wakes up 10 minutes before the thing goes off. For some reason, he always has. He uses these 10 minutes to stare aimlessly at the ceiling of his room, preparing himself for the events of another day. 10 minutes later, the buzzer goes off. He is quick to respond. The Alarm Plus clock has a nifty feature in which the device can send waves through the air and get a response from you to wake up quicker and more alert. He doesn't know all the techno mumbo-jumbo behind this gift his mom got him one Christmas back. But not Dad. Dad was reassigned 20-some years ago. David is not sure why the thought entered his head, but he realizes he hasn't taken his morning Chembal. With a sigh, David pops the lid and takes 3. David makes his way to the bathroom to begin the ritual of getting ready for work. The sterile white of the bathroom walls has always been a little too bright for him. The kitchen and living room are gray, whereas the bedroom is a bland, creamy color. Before David can fully realize that he hates all these colors, the pills he took 5 minutes ago kick in, and suddenly he really has more pressing matters to get to, like work. He finally makes his way to the bathroom a full 5 minutes before he is supposed to be in there, based off his own internal clock. The thing of it is, he always is 5 minutes early. As he stands there prepping his toothbrush with toothpaste, David takes a moment to look at himself in the mirror. David Michael Nash is a 29-year-old man with brown hair and brown eyes. One of David's best features is his complexion. In the summer, his skin quickly deepens to a golden bronze, and while it does lighten in the winter months, the many hours of his life in the sun has ensured his complexion always has a reminder of the summer. Believe it or not, this is important to David. Still being single requires him to maintain a certain physical fitness should a woman enter the picture. Although with each passing year, David's optimism in this happening becomes slimmer. David is in pretty solid shape. He was required to serve in the military for a 4-year enlistment at 18. Before that, he was a second-string quarterback for his not-so-important football team in a not-so-important high school that he doesn't remember the name of on most days. So he has always been someone who respected the vice of a steady workout after his day of work. Plus, without a family or wife or even girlfriend, David doesn't have a reason to not stay in shape. He stands right below 6 feet. One of the reasons he knew real quick he would never be an actual football player in any way than besides on his high school bench. But David is smart. Top 10% in his school. Once he finished his mandatory service in the UCA military, everyone at 18 must serve 4 years at the least. He entered a college where he got a degree in middle federal level studies, which meant, after 2 years, he could begin working for the federal government. Not as a politician, but as one of the people in the office buildings where the work moves at a snail's pace. This was fine by David because, frankly speaking, he knew he wasn't meant for much more. David successfully brushes his teeth, washes his face, combs his hair, applies his deodorant, and makes his way back to his bedroom to put on his outfit for work. As he opens his closet, he finds the pair of slacks he planned to wear, a dark tan pair of slacks. He always wears dark tan on Mondays and a blue button-up, a solid mix as he sees it. He tucks his shirt in and lines it up perfectly with his button and fly and put his even darker tan leather belt on. Slips his casual smart shoes on and grabs his wallet, keys, and phone, and then heads for the door. As David makes his way to the car, he takes note of his yard. The grass is just about half an inch higher than the other 2 apartments' yards, and he rolls his eyes. He is going to have to mow this Saturday, and he knows he did not recharge the mower's fusion core. That's going to put him back $40 this Friday, on top of the $80 for refilling of his car's fusion core. The federal government a couple decades ago made the move to nuclear-based power, away from the fossil fuel and electric model-based power forms. Although, truth be told, he is not sure what kind of nuclear power, just because he has seen the plants that store all the power that Census and Arrowgate Solutions companies use to make all these amazing feats of nuclear power work. And they don't remind him really of anything like the models of nuclear plants from before these companies came about. They were these giant buildings that almost always seemed to have a singular peak at the very top. He knows what those look like from his history lessons in school when he was a kid. But hey, it works, and we have more energy than ever before, and that's why they are in business, thinks David, as he unlocks his car with a touch of his fingerprint. The car door opens, and David gets in the driver's seat, presses the button to start the car up, and punches in the office's address he works at, and then put his hand of the auto drive sensor next the gear shift. Engaging in auto drive. Good morning, Dave. I see we are off to work today. Would you like to stop at a charging station? I noticed we are operating at a half-charged core, and based off all previous indicators, you prefer to recharge at half. The car's AI system, a soft feminine voice, named Cindy, says to David, "Yeah, let's go ahead and pull into the first charge station you see, and it's David, not Dave." David does not like to be called Dave. Even as a teen, he preferred to be called Michael or Mike, his middle name, over Dave. As he got older, he just got used to being called David, but is quick to remind people it's never Dave, even if those people are automated voices in his car, brought to him by Census Tech automobiles. Understood, David? Are you sure you would like me to choose the first charging station? Analytics of your heart rate indicate you feel uncomfortable at the first charge station en route to work in the mornings. Your heart rate is much more relaxed at the second station. The car makes a good point, David realizes. Yeah, let's hit the second station instead. David says, not initially thinking of what he is saying before he says it. David, the car's AI Cindy says, I know the term hit can mean go there, but based off your current standing as a federal employee, it is advised you use more professional terminology when speaking in public. David rolls his eyes at the fact that his car's AI had to remind him of this, and silently agrees with the note from the car as he begins his drive to work. The news on the radio this morning is all abuzz with the explosion of a chem farm factory that makes Chembal pills. It goes on to report the capture and on-spot execution of the terrorist who performed the attack. I just can't believe someone would be so heartless in this modern world we live in that they would just go and blow up a factory making medication that literally the entire country and most of the world needs to survive, shouts an incredibly snobby, young and college-educated sounding voice. It just goes to show how far removed these fringe groups and individuals get. This is what happens when people don't have proper access to medication and information. This really must be a message to everyone. Get yourself regular doctor visits to maintain a proper Chembal prescription, and for goodness sakes, at the very least, a +4U smart mattress that helps you sleep deeper and really get the rest we all need today. Says a voice that sounds like someone who has spent most of their life surrounded by the upper wealthy class and celebrities of the country. Although David does not really enjoy hearing these people talk, no one else on any other channel really sounds any better. Besides, he does agree with what they are saying. It's a good thing they caught the guy. Everyone at a government office always gets a little uneasy when there is a terrorist on the loose in the UCA. It may be a big place, but nobody wants their workplace to be the target of the terrorist. David keeps his hand on the auto drive sensor as his car begins to go down his street, and the morning news talk show continues to drone with an ad for the new Census VR+2, a new version of Plug in virtual reality. Marketed as an experience like none other, although David could have sworn the same was said about the Census VR Plus model before this one. It is quickly followed by an ad for a new prescription for a chem farm medication that helps reduce stress in young children. The car is advising David his observed responses to the information on the radio seems to be negative and offers to change the station to something he may be more interested in. David initially goes to grunt his approval, but not wanting to invoke the car's grammatical corrections makes a point to answer with words that echo his position in his federal-funded job position. Yes, a change in the direction of music would be appreciated. Thank you, David says with his voice clearer than he was expecting. Days like today are the worst. He has to fill up the core in his car. You should always at half charge. That's what they say anyways. But that means instead of getting to the office 20 minutes early, he is only going to get there 10 minutes early. Why does this matter so much to David? Because that means David is only going to get to smoke 2 cigarettes as opposed to 4. 10 years ago, as David was serving the second of 4 mandatory years in military service, he could smoke as much as he wanted. Nearly everyone in the service did. Most of the time, the young mandatory recruits, like himself, smoked to help control their emotions or to look cool. The volunteers were typically the crowd less likely to engage, but even still, There was several of them that partook. As a result, the powers that be became concerned that a large population of younger soldiers would return after the 4 years with a new, nasty habit. They contracted synthetic foods to address the issue. Synthetic did what made the most sense with the federal grant, as well as its growing massive fortune, and simply bought the last 2 tobacco companies outright, cut the supply chain, and in 1 month, released Kleenex cigarettes. David still remembers all the young, restless men and women shuffling around the base, desperate for a quick puff from any of the hoarded and stashed leftovers that some had been hiding. The officers were quickly worried this would lead to multiple on-site issues. Young, somewhat combat-trained people with weapons and a desire for a now very limited commodity could be a powder keg. Everyone was forced to up their Chembal intake by 2 additional pills, as well as walk around with those nicotine bandages until the newly minted Kleenex arrived on station. To put it in the words of a then 19-year-old David, those cigarettes sucked. The nicotine was diluted, and there was only one type at the time. Since then, there has been 4 different dosage released. In the middle of this thought, David's car notifies him they have arrived at the second charge-up station and effortlessly pulls up to the charging port. David sighs as he releases the auto-drive sensor, turns off the car, and sets out. Everyone at this charge station is either going to work or just getting off some night shift type of job. Everyone here looks like someone who is part of the 99%. That other charge station has some strange activities, to say the least. David knows it's a small fraction of people, but there's always some non-medicated, non-working creeps looking like they take a different kind of drug, as opposed to the ones that help you be a valued member of society. There's also that guy, the one at the register. There's always been something about him that makes David uneasy. His face is scarred up, a wild-looking slash that goes from the top of his forehead left side all the way down to the right side of his chin. He never looks happy, and he's always reading something. But it's not an e-book, or even just a regular old book. If David didn't work where he worked, he probably would not have noticed what the man was reading, but since he does, he knows it's something of an old-fashioned newspaper. David doesn't know where or why the man has them. They stopped making newspapers in that form 26 years ago, as it was deemed unneeded as we progressed to a bright and environment-friendly future. But that guy always has one. But not at this station. The woman behind the register smiles as every person walks in. "Welcome to Charge and Run this morning," she always says, with a bright, winning smile as customers enter the front doors. She never skips a beat, even when she's assisting in the ringing up of a shopper. The checkout AI system, provided by Arrogate Solutions, typically can handle anything thrown at it. The station's a brightly lit, well-maintained convenience shop, and David considers getting something to snack on from the many rows of snacks and candies. But he holds himself back and gets in line to request a charge up on port 8. 5 minutes of standing and going through the purchase options with the register AI, and David heads back towards the doors to begin his charge. "Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for choosing Charge and Run this morning," the woman beams, and David throws her a tired smile and wave. Another 5 minutes at the port, and David begins his way back to work. Arriving with exactly 10 minutes before the start time, he is only able to get 2 Kleenex classics in before the day starts. Standing under the shelter area that is designated for the smokers, Matthew and Simon come over to join him. "Fantastic," moans David internally as his friends come to greet him good morning. Matthew is 30 years old and is married with 1 child. His wife wanted more when they were younger, but the doctors advised against it. Matthew is also a solid 25 pounds overweight and gains a consistent 5 additional pounds every year since they met on David's first day at the office. Simon is a small man, small in weight and height, but he has recently been matched up with a girl he met on a social dating app and has begun growing a beard, as they are considered an attractive fashion trend in recent years. But Simon's beard has been growing out in patches, and he has been applying some sort of cream to help fill in those sections of hairlessness. "How are you today, David?" says Matthew, always the first one to say anything when the 3 find themselves in the same area. "Oh, I can't complain on a day like this one," David says. For some strange reason, he almost felt himself say, "I can't complain to someone like you," but he was able to stop that from occurring. These impulsive thoughts have been striking him more and more, and it has become something of a concern for David. The last thing he needs is for an evaluation with his doctor to end up being prescribed a higher dose of Chembal or even an additional medication to work in relation to his already slightly higher dosage of Chembal. "You see the game last night on Primetime Sports?" muses Simon. "Oh, wonderful." The second question is always from Simon. It almost constantly is in regard to some sort of sporting event that David practically never finds interest in, especially the last 6 years of his life. "The one with the Bucks? Yeah, I caught some of it. Had to get the rest this morning in newsfeed, though. I was hoping the Commanders could pull through, but they never do." David lies. He played football in high school, he was decent even at the game, but always struggled with desire and just natural physical limitations. When he knew he was not meant to play the game as a career, he also knew he would not have the option. So many entertainers, intelligently gifted, or athletes get, which is to request the right to forego the mandatory 4-year military service and chase the career or college options those people have right out of high school. When he learned the realities of his life, he lost almost all that remained of his interest in sports and the like. Simon's brow crinkles. It always does that when David admits to missing a big playoff game like that. "Real shame, David. That game was very important. Might be a historic one even. Total yards on both sides of offense combined broke the former playoff record," Matthew says with pride. Why does that even matter? The thought rings in David's head but quickly burns out as he knows that's not something one should say among friends who it does matter to. "Yeah, I know. I was just busy brushing up on the personal life agenda. Had to do a 45-minute conditioning, another hour or so on the date app. You know, no rest for the wicked," David says, making sure to add some excitement in his voice in that last part. Both Simon and Matthew smile at David with innocent and believing smiles. "Apologies, David. It's sometimes hard to remember you are still looking for the match," Simon says. Simon knows the truth. At least he should, David ponders. It was only 2 months ago, and he was consistently on these apps looking for a match in the same position David was claiming to be in. Of course, the truth was, David did start watching the game, knowing this conversation was coming the following day, not just from these two, but everyone in the office. But after the first 15 minutes of gameplay that took more like 30, he turned it off. Then he completed 2 hours of conditioning and spent 3 hours chain smoking on his apartment patio. Those two things have in recent months become his favorite pastimes. He isn't certain as to why. "Well, you know Mr. Bondre is going to have quite a workload for us today. Word is, there was a lot of internal upper-level chatter about that terrorist attack last night," Matthew announces. "Oh? What's that exactly?" David asks, curious about the answer. "Well, the building that was hit last night was not just a production site, it was the second largest one in this state, as well as an information hub for the Chem Farm Company. When that site went down, they lost a sizable portion of transportation information worldwide, as well as Chembal, to supply the general area with," says Matthew, all too happy with himself that he is in the know of these things. "Truth is, there is even rumblings there may be a 2-week possible shortage in the area that was hit. Very scary business," Matthew continues. "Yeah, that's a concern for sure," shivers David. In his life, he has seen 2 shortages of Chembal, never in his area, but he knows based off his work that anytime there is an area in which there is a shortage that lasts longer than 10 days, it heightens the probability that those in that area also must up the amount they take to deal with the imbalance brought about by the shortage. Thank goodness it's not here in our little community, but I still feel for those in that area. Maybe I'll donate to an organization out that way. I'm sure Sharon will take notice," Simon says. David cannot stand how Simon is always basing decisions off what he thinks his new date app girlfriend will think. To be clear, Simon was the donating type even before she came around, but now she has become justification behind why he does it. David simply smiles at Simon and says, "Now that's a proper line of thought, Simon. I think I'll donate as well." David knows he will only donate a small amount, but it will call Matthew's bluff and make him have to donate. For some reason, that makes David feel a sense of satisfaction, putting a genuine smile on his face, but not in the way of being a good Samaritan. He just enjoys forcing Matthew to shut up or put up, but he has never been sure as to why. As David walks to his desk after a quick team meeting led by Mr. Bondre, he passes through the seemingly endless rows of gray cubes. The floor has some generic medium blue section carpet, David can hear people already logging in or pressing startup buttons to start the day. As he approaches his section where his cube sits near to the kitchenette, he begins to smell the wave of fresh coffee and butterless popcorn being made. David isn't sure why, but people in this office are always making butterless popcorn to snack on throughout the day. David begins to log into his system. He places his hand on the mouse sensor and thinks of the home screen for his daily starting routine. The monitor flips over to that screen. The mouse sensor, brought to David by Arrowgate Solutions, can tap into what you are thinking to avoid having to move the mouse around and click on things on screen. It's a more effective method of work. David's job lies in the medical distribution monitoring quarter of this section of the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. His work is in relation to monitoring distribution of certain medications, including the third and fourth generations of Chembal. They already have a fifth and sixth generation, but some people can't afford to upgrade to the newer versions of the medication, so a decent supply of third and fourth gen Chembal is needed worldwide. Nearly no one uses first or second. They don't even produce those versions anymore. He must review amounts received by certain states within a certain section of the UCA, report his findings, review any advertisements ChemFarm wishes to use, and send for approval to the advertising quarter. The first half of his day seems to flow steadily. David goes out of his way to stay glued to his desk and avoid any artificial conversations he may get snared into if he steps away. At noon, a digital bell sounds throughout the building to notify anyone who may be prescribed Chembal that this is the point in which it is advised to take their second dose. Considering the fact that everyone in the building takes it, that means everyone is now reminded to pop their next dosage. David hears the universal sound of everyone in every cube pop the tops of their bottles and the rattling sound of pills being shook out. Some people take lesser doses and pop the caps on quicker than others. A few, like David, are prescribed to take 3 times the dose of most, and this requires about half a second longer than everyone else. David dreads this half a second. He knows everyone can hear, and knows he takes a slightly higher dosage. In theory, no one is ever supposed to judge one another for this. But he can't help feeling in the pit of his stomach that it makes him seem more unhinged compared to the others. That if anyone here would ever go terrorist, it's those who must take 3 or more pills each dose. David is one of them. The second half of his day, David is not so lucky. While he always stays in his cube, he knows like clockwork. Matthew, who is a group lead in the section, uses the second half of his day to engage the team and make sure everyone is doing all right or has enough work to stay busy. They always do, and since he considers David a friend, this means he will stay at David's cube longer by an average of 5 minutes and talk about work and family matters. David hears Matthew say a goodbye with that classic, almost real, almost fake laugh as he leaves the cube beside his. "Hey David, how's the work holding up?" Matthew says as he hikes up his slacks. They are the same dark brown type as David's, just a little bigger, due to the steady growing width of Matthew. "Yeah, pretty good. Just wrapped up the start of afternoon reports. I have a report on the advertisement of ChemFarm's newest medication, Fertility Plus for Men, looking about wrapped and ready for advertising reviews, and then I'll get back to 4th Gen Chembal." David summarizes quickly. He doesn't need much practice with this little informal report. He says nearly the same thing to Matthew every day, minus the exception of when a medication advertisement comes along. "Sounds excellent, David. You always stay on top of things, never letting anything slip through the cracks," quips Matthew as usual. "You know, David, in all seriousness, someday, old Bondre is going to call it a career, and here is hoping I will get that promotion. That would leave my spot open. You are my clear choice," Matthew declares. At least once a month for the last 2 years, he has said the same thing to David. David appreciates that Matthew holds him in such high regard, but he knows that Bondre won't be retiring for at least another 5 years. And even still, Matthew must edge out 10 other group leads under the same division umbrella to get Bondre's spot. While they may be an effective unit, so is every section under this division, and David wouldn't be none too shocked if every group lead thinks this way as well. But David just smiles back at Matthew and says, "Thanks, Matthew. You keep me engaged for it. I'll keep pushing out the workload." With a wide smile on his face, like always, David knows this is exactly what Matthew wanted to hear. He also knows what Matthew wants the follow-up to be. "How's the family doing? Anything on the weekend happen?" David asks. Matthew's smile drops only ever so slightly. Well, we were considering a small little event at the holodecks. You know how much Daisy so enjoys the decks. But with that monster on the loose all last week, we had no choice but to stay in. Mary and I don't like to risk it. Daisy is Matthew's shockingly overweight daughter. Based on what David has heard from Matthew's stories and what he has seen from some of the occasional social gatherings he attended, she is spoiled. Not only do they have her on a dose equal to David's in Chembal, but they also have her on 2 other medications to deal with her more aggressive and loud behaviors. Even with all that, she still struggles with not being able to accept when she doesn't have what she thinks she is entitled to. And to avoid the possibility of having to send her off for re-education so young, they opt to give in to whatever she wants. Mary, Matthew's wife, is the small, quiet, atypical matchup to a personality like Matthew's. She never can stand up to her short and round little titan of a daughter, and Matthew's fear of being a federal employee in good standing trying to avoid re-education for said daughter leaves his hands bound too. I bet that had Daisy in quite a mood, David says, wishing the conversation would end. Oh yes, she threw a very impressive fit. We knew it was just unfair how it all played out for her, so we went and ordered an express delivery of that new VR whatchacallit to replace her old one. It was high time the old one was a fossil anyways. She cheered up a bit after that. Incredible, thinks David. That other toy she had was only a year old, and on top of that, it was a replacement to the same version of the thing she had before it broke, which David was certain came about due to a Daisy fit. After some further dialogue, that David honestly couldn't remember, probably because of his desire for it to end, Matthew left him be to continue his round of the section, leaving David alone to finally resume his work. As the day comes to an end, David logs out and begins to make his way through the coffee and popcorn-scented maze of gray and blue. Once at his car, he unlocks, gets in, presses the button for the car to start. "Hello, Dave. How was work today?" the car's AI asks. "It was a good day. Please refer to me as David." "I do not like Dave," David says. "Noted. I apologize, David. I notice you have the map set to route home. Would you like to engage in auto drive? It is 95% safer when the auto drive function is in use." The car reminds David. David places his hand on the auto drive sensor. "Yes, please. Let's go ahead and route to home now," David says, trying his best to mask a sigh. The car ride back to his apartment is relatively uneventful, like all the others. The radio plays an afternoon talk show that covers the issue of the Chem Farm attack and interviews some celebrities discussing their spiritual journeys, as they found how useful some new medications that rolled out this year have been in relation to some early hands-on experiences with the new VR system being prepared for general public use. As David's car approaches his driveway and stops, he presses the button and exits. He follows the same general evening activities he always does, spending 2 hours on a condition exercise, 3 hours more chain smoking on his patio, eating dinner a little later with his final dosage of Chembal, followed by a shower, and then retreating to his plush 4U bed. What David doesn't realize is while this day was the same as any other, he has experienced for the last 6 years. He is about to be a part of a chain of events that will show him the world he lives in is not as clean as he thinks, and it will all start tomorrow with a new arrival at his office.